instability, the fact that this is an economic system which, if I have the numbers correctly, every 4 to 7 years has a downturn, and that these downturns can sometimes be deep and long-lasting, like in the 30s, and really like the one after 2008. Is this, in a sense, a sign that this is a systemic problem? And I wanted your reaction to the validity of Marx's focusing on instability, on this bizarre quality.
I think one of the things that separates Marx from most economists is that most economists seem to like equilibrium and think there's something called equilibrium to which everything converges somewhere down the line. Marx says no, it diverges all of the time. So he's looking at it from the other direction and saying it creates disequilibrium, and the disequilibrium are the sorts of things we see in a crisis in which capital and labour sit side by side, and nobody knows how to employ them in productive ways, because somehow or other the market has not cleared and will not clear, and so that is then the mark of a genuine crisis.
What about the other critique, in a way, of capitalism? That besides being unstable, it is prone to inequality, and indeed extreme inequality of the sort we see around us today. How does Marxism go after or get at this inequality?
Well, Marx did an analysis which relied very much on the idea of perfect competition and pure competition. And what he showed was that under conditions of pure competition, the rich are going to get much richer and the poor are going to get much poorer. Now, we've had historic periods under capitalism where there's been some intervention from outside for political reasons and state reasons, so that we actually ended up with less inequality. Today, of course, the neoliberal period since the 1970s, everybody's been saying, let the market do the work and everything's going to be okay. And of course, the rich get richer, hand over fist, and it's getting even worse by the minute.
Yeah, so that, would you agree, for example, with Thomas Piketty and others like him, that there's some intrinsic logic to capital that produces inequality unless and until the very reaction to that inequality stops or reverses it for a while?
Yeah, no, there's something inherent within the system, and I guess the best way to summarize it is that in a perfect market situation, there is nothing more unequal than the equal treatment of unequals. Because everybody says the market is an egalitarian device, and it is. But if you start off much better endowed than me, then bit by bit, the gap between us goes higher, higher, and higher. And so that is what Marx showed brilliantly, I think, in Volume 1 of Capital, is that is an inevitable consequence of a free market capitalism.
So then, departing a little bit, but let me ask your opinion. How is it possible that capitalism has had defenders, past, present, and likely future, who seem either unable or unwilling to contend with these two central flaws, you might say, instability and inequality? How is it possible for a system with those flaws to present itself almost as the opposite of them?
I think one of the things we should recognize, though, is that capitalism has not been all bad. It's technologically very dynamic, and it's given us a lot of possibilities to organize life in a very, very different kind of way. And that's one of the big contradictions of the present situation. The technologies around us are fantastic. Labor-saving technologies, time-saving technologies. And of course, people are fascinated by that. And that's, I think, how a lot of people have a fetish belief almost in the beauties of a capitalist system, because it does all of those things. Marx's point is to say, yes, it does all those things, but then what does it do? It produces homelessness. It produces less and less capacity to educate people. It makes students go into debt in order to get an education, does all of these things. And Marx is therefore emphasizing the contradictions. And I think that the trouble with conventional thinking is that it emphasizes the positives and it refuses to pay any attention to the negatives, or assumes they're external accidents, they're not integral to the system.
Yes, it always bothered me from my earliest times as a student. I used to make this comparison. I wonder how you think about it. That capitalism produces the problem of selling all the value that they has come out of their assembly
Right.
lines. So they invent something called advertising to
Yeah.
promote
Right.
the purchase. What an advertiser does is try to get you to part with your money for some object. And so the logic of advertisement present all the positives and obliterate all the negatives. And this, which is a distortion of human communication for a profitable end, then seeps into the rest of our consciousness so that we begin to think in terms of either or rather than the unity of the positive and the negative. It's a kind of capitalism coming back and obstructing its own analytical capabilities through this advertising imagery.
Yes. I don't think it's only advertising, though. I think, to me, one of the things is about capital is the production of wants, needs, and desires in such a way as to define a whole way of life. For example, I think of suburbanization after World War II and the creation of the American suburb. And I think of the way in which that was supported by all of these sitcoms, I Love Lucy, The Brady Bunch, all this kind of stuff. It was advertising, in a sense, not in the crass sense, but in a real sense, a whole style of life. And then the whole style of life has political consequences. If you are an affluent person living in the suburb, you feel, and you become a homeowner, you get concerned about the value of your home. And you don't want people moving in who might depress the value of the home, and so you get exclusionary, and you start to get exclusions and segregations and gated communities, and it's a destructive way of life, which is actually created around the organization of wants, needs, and desires, which are not necessarily the ones we would freely choose, but are those which are necessary for the accumulation of capital to continue.
Yeah, well, the system is producing us
Yes.
rather than serving us. It's almost the Frankenstein monster. Our creation comes back and dominates us.
Right. But at the same time, there are possibilities. We see this in the internet. I mean, the internet came as a great sort of avatar of freedom and communication and all the rest of it. And now look what we've got. Net neutrality disappears. All of a sudden we find we're being surveyed through Google and everything else. So everything which was really positive about the internet suddenly it gets turned by commercialization and capital accumulation into something that's negative.
Yes, and I remember growing up with these inventions, all of which were going to be labor saving.
Absolutely.
And my students today give me descriptions of their 60 and 70-hour weeks as a kind of mockery of all those claims.
The same thing in the household. We have household technologies now which are time-saving, 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 time-saving. And if you ask people, does anybody, how do you feel these days? Do you have a lot of free time? And the answer is no. And of course, one of Marx's ideas about a really, really good socialist society was one which was characterized by massive amounts of free time, where you could do what the hell you liked.
Let me ask you a question that jumps forward, but I know it's in the minds of viewers and listeners. How do you view this Trump phenomena here in the United States? Is this a capitalism in trouble, flailing around with an extreme reaction? Or is this a capitalism confident in some sense of its capability and therefore willing to indulge a naughty person in leadership? How do you square your Marxist analytics with what you see?
Marx has a very good analytic concept, which I like a lot and is not used enough. And the concept is alienation. People are alienated in their work, for the most part. A lot of work is meaningless these days. People are alienated in their daily lives because they're dealing with a telephone company and all of these other things and credit cards and all the rest of it. People are alienated politically. We have a mass alienation of populations right now, and alienated populations generally act in ways which are violent and angry, or they sulk. And I think actually we're in a political situation where we have mass alienation right now. And until we address the roots of that alienation, which are the redefinition of labor processes by capital accumulation, the redefinition of daily life through the processes of capital accumulation. Until we deal with all of those kinds of questions, and of course the buying and selling of political power by capital, until we deal with all those questions, I think we're not going to go anywhere. And I think Trump is the president of alienation.
Wow. Well, David, as always,
Thank you.
it's never enough time.